Well, hello, everybody. We've got a small number on at the moment, but more people who might be joining, and some people I know who can't make it, who are wanting to get the recording later on. So welcome to everybody. I'm Natalie from Incredible People, and I really appreciate you making some time to spend with us today. Look, before we get into the training, I really would like to, first of all, acknowledge that we are not the traditional owners, or I'm certainly not the traditional owner on the land where we meet. And I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country wherever you are. I'm here in Perth, in Bulu, and the people that I work with here are the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And of course to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. So let's get into the training. I was wondering how many people would be too excited about onboarding, because in some ways it's not a very exciting subject, but it makes such a difference. So let's just give you a little bit of an idea about who I am and why I feel I can talk about this. So who am I? Well, basically, Incredible People is my company. I started about 16 years ago. I am very much a leadership tragic. I have this belief from, I guess it came very early in my coaching career, that when you have a leader who gets it right, it makes the experience of work for everybody just so much better. They can come to work, bring their best selves, go home feeling like they've made a difference and that they've been valued. And that's what drives me every day. So I work with leaders so that they can create great teams and great workplaces. I've had experience across all sorts of sectors and industries, and I know some of you here today come from non-profit organisations, from state government organisations, and from private sector organisations. So basically, I started out my career in private sector and corporates, and then I've been in small business. And then since being a consultant, I've worked in lots and lots of different sorts of organisations, and also in non-profits as well. So basically, it's starting to sound really old, but I have actually trained and coached over 1,000 leaders. And I guess the reason I say that isn't to impress you, but to explain that I've seen leadership and teams and operations in so many different contexts. I've heard lots of the challenges that leaders face, and I've really helped, worked with them to help them understand it. So I guess I bring all that experience to you. Feel free to ask any questions that you like along the way. And so basically, my trademark, as you can see here, what I really pride myself on is giving you practical, doable things that when you walk away, you don't just come along to a workshop and learn something and think, oh, well, that was a nice idea. I want you to be able to go away and do something with it that will make a difference to your workplace. So here's what we're going to talk about today. As it says, we're really going to talk about the impact of effective onboarding on both the individual who you've just hired and your whole team, and as you as well, really. And we're going to learn how to design a structured, engaging onboarding experience that aligns with your organisational culture. So I'll give you a template, but you need to make it work for yourself. And I know, for some of you, for example, Danielle, you would have some organisational, perhaps some onboarding processes that you need to follow corporately. But some of you won't have that, and you'll be designing something unique every time. But I encourage you to, it doesn't matter what sort of business you are, whether you're hiring baristas or whether you're hiring, brain surgeons, basically we need to find a way to get them on board quickly and get them productive. If you've hired great people, you just want them on board and flourishing quickly, and that's what they want to. They want to feel like they're adding value quickly. And yes, we'll talk about some strategies to set some clear expectations and provide support to build confidence. And finally, we're going to explore some practical techniques to foster connections and a sense of belonging so that they stay. So that's probably really important. Just before we get into the content, though, I thought I'd let you know how to participate. So as you've already done, oh, hi, Ro, you're in Brisbane. Thank you. You lead a specialist team with government department, and you're onboarding 2 staff in a couple of weeks' time. Perfect timing. That's great. And Right, we've got a couple of others on, so feel free to jump in and introduce yourself when you're free. Just letting in Vicky now. So just letting you know how to participate throughout. So obviously, as we've said, put comments in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go. Cameras on if possible. So hi Vicky, nice to see you. She's got her camera on. It is an interactive workshop, so if you are comfortable putting a camera on, that's fine. I'd be appreciated. We've only got a small number on here today, but there's quite a number registered for the recording, obviously. There will be lots of opportunities to discuss throughout the process, throughout the session, and I really do want you to put any, raise your hand if you really want to say something, or if you've got a story, or if you've got a question throughout. So don't wait for question time, but there will be open questions at the end. So pop your questions in at the, as you go, and we'll make sure that we cover them at the end as well. As I said, I really want you to take away something that you can actually implement yourself. So very briefly, before we get into the content, I wanted to show you the momentum framework, which is our framework for developing leaders at any level of the organisation, and where this onboarding part fits. So you can see there's kind of three components to the momentum framework. There's deliver, there's grow, and there's optimise. And deliver is all about making sure that you're clear about your purpose, what is your plan, and how do you set up a framework so that people know what they're doing, how they're going, and whether they're contributing in a way that's driving team results. So that's the deliver part. Then we move around to grow, and this is where you're hiring. So some of you are already doing that or just done it. And then there's the onboarding part, which is where we fit. And then, of course, how you develop them to be competent in their current job, and how you develop your team to work well. And then the last part is about optimizing that team. So really growing them for future roles, scaffolding the roles, the key roles your own, to make sure you can take leave. People don't stress too much when you're away, and other key roles. And also that there's some business continuity planning. If something were to go wrong in one of your critical processes, people would know what to do. It just builds resilience with the team if there's a little bit of scaffolding around them. And then systemize is to make life as easy as possible for people, make sure it's streamlined what they're doing, and optimize IT or AI or anything that you can to make life as simple as possible for your team. Right, so as you can see, the onboarding part is fair smack bang in the middle of this. So there's work to be done before it, there's work to be done after it, but getting people on board quickly is a really critical component of being a good leader. Now, we are going to ask you a couple of questions along the way, but here's the first one. So we're going to go into a question for you now. I'm going to ask you to think back to when you started this current job. And out of 5, can you tell me, how would you rate your onboarding experience? I promise we won't tell your boss, okay? So how would you rate your onboarding experience as you started your current job? So 1 is really bad, and 5 is awesome, and 3 is they did okay. How would you rate your experience? A 3? Yeah, a 3, okay, a couple of 3s in there. So they did okay. All right. And I guess, thinking about it, were you an internal candidate or were you coming in from outside? External? Internal. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because sometimes I find that when you're internal, people tend to think, oh, you know your way around. We don't really need to look after you. You'll be right. Internal as well. Okay. So 3s and internal and external. All right. The next question then, and you can't see it, so I'll read it out to you. What's the one thing that you wish had been included in your onboarding process to make it better for you? Can you just pop something in the chat? Very good. A map of where everyone sits. Especially if you're in a big building with lots of layers and little corners and everyone's tucked away in different places, definitely. Names and faces, absolutely. A list of key staff, yeah, great. And how hard are these they're not that hard to do. So I think this is the key thing about onboarding. It might sound like a really boring topic, but it doesn't take that much effort to get it right. It takes a little bit of thinking, and maybe now, after you've been on this call, or on this workshop, you stop and have a think and make a note and spend some time to build what will be your next onboarding experience. Just make a checklist of your own, or a list of things that you want to make sure you would do, because it's fresh in your mind now, and then you'll be able to access it quickly. I will be sending you some information after the workshop. I'll send you a recording of the call to listen back to it if you want to, and a couple of other resources that are designed to help you keep going. But of course, take your own notes, and it'll be great because that will help you contextualize it for your jobs that you'll be recruiting for. Okay, so why onboarding really matters. So what the data tells us, and there's plenty of research around this, is that if you get onboarding done well, if you've got a strong program, it improves new hires retention by 82%. So you really are reducing that risk of turnover. People are quite vulnerable in their first 90 days in a new role. If they're not, the job's not matching their experience, they'd be gone. And potentially they might have had other offers out there, or they might have applied for lots of jobs, and other ones will come in while they're a bit vulnerable with you. So you want to stick them with you. Also, their engagement is 2.6 times higher if they've been onboarded well, and their productivity is over 70% higher, and that's from strongdm.com. So that's what you want, isn't it? You want them engaged, but you also want them productive quickly. And as I said earlier, that's what they want too. 69% of employees are more likely to remain with a company for 3 years if they have been onboarded well. So it's not just something you're doing right now and saving them turning over in 90 days. It's actually an investment in helping people stick with you for much longer. So when you see the other side of things, what goes wrong, I guess, when there's ineffective onboarding, as we've implied, 1 in 3 left their job within 90 days. And when you think about the cost of that, I think Forbes says that it takes about 20% of a new person's annual salary to replace them. This is a new person. An experienced person is more like 200% because of all the experience they take away. So when you think about all the effort you've gone to find a great person and to put them in the job, helping them to stick is really important, not only for the impact on your team, but also obviously the costs as well. And it sounds like some of you on here have done lots of recruiting and doing lots of onboarding, and you know the churn that happens if people come and go very quickly. It seems like a real wasted effort. I also have to say, I think it's also a bit of a strategy for your employee value proposition. That's very HR-y speak for, you know, what people are attracted to about working for you. If you talk about this in your recruitment process or your hiring process, in interviews about what you'll do to help and support people if they're suitable coming on board, it can really help make the decision for you as opposed to some other offer that they might get at the same time. It's funny, I was talking to my colleague who works with me here in Incredible People, and she was saying how her daughter's at university and looking to do a semester abroad, you know, like an exchange. And she said this is where she thinks onboarding can be a really great strategic draw card for employers, because her daughter's looking at different universities abroad, and she said one of them just like, yeah, well, you can come along and you can join in our classes kind of thing, very maybe a 3 out of 5. Whereas another one is saying, look, we have someone who welcomes you at the airport, you have a buddy the whole time you're here, and every time you leave campus you can access a free interpreter who can go with you. Now, you know, that is a winning strategy, because they're now looking at that university and thinking, well, how can that fit for us? Because they feel like they'll be better looked after and supported while they're in a strange place. And that's how new people feel like when they start with you, whether they're internal or external. I guess if you're internal and you're just going up in the or within the same team, you probably do know your way around. But if you're moving to another team, you still need an investment in onboarding. All right, so hopefully you're sold. So now I want to ask you what some of the challenges are, and you can put them in the chat if you prefer. What do you think some of the challenges are of poor onboarding for a new employee? What happens when someone isn't onboarded well? given you some of the data about turnover and things, but more practically. What happens for them? They won't feel welcome and part of the team. Exactly. People don't know what they're supposed to be doing or who they can link in with. That's really important. Yeah, so they're just feeling like they're there, and they want to do well, but they've kind of been left to sort it out for itself, you know, the whole sink or swim thing. And when they go home that first day or that first week, you know, they're like, okay, I think this will be all right, or I'm not sure if this is going to be all right, quite frankly. They feel undervalued and not seen. That's a really good point. So here you are, you've hired a great person, and now you've got them there feeling undervalued and not seen, finding their way around. That's certainly not what you would want. And now you can see why quite often your top performers will leave. They'll have other offers and they'll be gone. So what about for your team? Unaware of their role and responsibilities. That's also a good point, Glenda and Susie. Thank you. So what about for the team? What's the experience for the team, your broader team, when this person isn't getting onboarded very well? Yeah, they're disconnected, but the team is disconnected as well from this person. Like, who is that foreigner there? You know, who's that newbie? Nobody really knows who they are. The team can feel resentful and feel that the person isn't a team player. Exactly. So they're casting that onto the other person. It's not even their fault. They're going to feel like they have to take time away from their own tasks to babysit for a while. Well, yes, that's a good point, and maybe they will have to help out, but it does set a standard for the team, and that's a good point. If you're letting that person out there on their own, then what does that say about the rest of the team and how supported the rest of the team are going to feel generally? So that's not the culture we're trying to build in most workplaces that I know of. So we're trying to build an inclusive, connected, you know, collaborative workplace where everyone feels valued. All right, and of course for you, what's the impact of potential challenges for you as the leader? If you don't onboard someone well, we probably fast forward to what we've talked about before. You're going to probably have turnover. Your people aren't going to be putting in that extra effort. They're not engaged and they're not going to be productive. You're going to need to be spending a lot more time getting them up to speed. So putting in that a little bit more effort at the very front end for someone helps in the long term. So that's the key message. It's really important. Do not undervalue the first few weeks of someone's time with you, but also if they're on probation, managing the whole probation well. And I'll talk about that a bit later on. So there's 3 critical components of onboarding, and we're going to talk later on. I'll give you a particular tip about how to make sure you cover all 3, but I'd be keen to get your input as well of what works for you or what has worked for you in your employment or past employment. So clarity is the obvious one, and you've touched on it. You know, what are their roles and responsibilities? Making sure they know exactly what's expected of them, and you know, what are the success measures that they're striving to, because it helps them to build, you know, to work out where they fit and you know, build their confidence. So certainly go through the position description with them. Make sure if there's any KPIs they need to hit, that they're aware of what they are. So people need to know what's expected. If there's no expectations, then it's just, you're a bit rudderless, you're floating around. And we'll give you some specific tips on these later. So connection is the next one. So strong relationships and cultural integrations, this is with your team, with how things get done around here. That's how you build engagement and collaboration from day one. So having that time to get to know the people in their immediate workspace and other key people outside of their immediate workspace that they need to know, maybe give them a map, as Vicky said, so if they need to go and find people, that's really important. But also the other part of this is how we do things around here. So if you've got a team charter or a customer service charter or certain ways of working, it's really important to get them onto those really quickly, because that gives them some freedom. You know, it's like they know how to operate in this strange land. And then finally, confidence. So clarity, connection, and confidence are the three components of effective onboarding. They need to have the right tools, the right training, and other support that's needed to empower them to contribute quickly and effectively. So some of you will have some mandatory training that needs to be done, very early in the piece, maybe on day 1 and 2 and in the first week. Others you'll need to sit down with them and work out, well, what do you already know? Where are the gaps and how can we fill those? And we'll talk about them a bit later on. So clarity, connection, and confidence are the three things that we need to really keep in mind. How are we building those things for our newbie? So we've got next section is some components of a successful onboarding plan. And so there's these 5 components which are quite logical and quite obvious in many ways. What are you doing before they come in? Has anyone ever been in a job or seen people join a team and actually they can't access their IT? There's no computer sign in for 3 days. They're actually basically can't do anything for 3 days while they don't have, IT. Yes, unfortunately, that happens all too often. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. Sometimes there's going to be mistakes made, but on the whole, you're going to know with enough lead time. You just need to make sure you're letting the building access people know, all those sorts of people. So preparation before day 1, making sure it's a welcoming environment on the first day. As we said, clear expectations, have that conversation, find out what training and development you need for them and what sort of ongoing support can you provide them with. So let's work through some of these things, and I'm very happy for you to add anything in the chat or any questions, or just jump on, pop your hand up and give us a story from your own experience as well, or ask a question. So as it says here, the preparation you do beforehand sort of reduces anxiety, but also builds excitement and ensures that the person kind of transitions into the role really well. So there might be some things that you can send out to them before the first day. Certainly things like a code of conduct. Yes, there might be some training on that once they come in. You could have them have a read of it beforehand, make sure they know the values. If there is a position description available, please make sure they've got that. Hopefully they've already seen that. But you might be able to send them out, like you say, the map of the building, where to find certain teams. That could all go in a pack beforehand. Not that you wouldn't give it to them on day 1, but if they know that they're coming in with that, just think about how much more confident you would be if you're coming into a big building with lots of different teams and you know that you've got a map to be able to find things if you need them. You might also want to talk about where to park. That's not, ridiculously expensive if they're going to drive in, how to come in by public transport. Those sorts of things can really be useful for somebody if they're really new to your building and new to your facility, to help them to feel ready to come in and not stressed about day 1. It takes one of the stresses away. You could even send them out a little sheet of the team. Someone said the names and faces, which would be great. Could you send that out about your team? Here's the people and their positions, so that when they come in, at least they recognise some of the faces, and they might already put a name to a face. It'll help them remember names faster. That would be really useful for me. I have to admit, I'm not the best at remembering names. I'm really good at remembering faces, but eventually, of course, and I know lots of people's names, but if you're brand new and you're learning lots of people's names, it would be nice to have your immediate team sorted before you even walk in. So obviously set up their workstation with everything they need. Make sure that they've got a pen and paper there and a stapler if that's what they need, whatever they need there. Make sure that they've got it. Make sure the team know that someone is starting. There's nothing worse than when someone just gets paraded in on their first day and they go, oh, who are you? Where did you come from? Make sure that they do know who's coming in and assign roles to them in terms of helping out as needed. And as we said before, make sure that all the passes, badges, IT, access, equipment, and any mandatory training are all ready to go, so that day 1 you look organised and professional, but most importantly, they don't feel like they're just being forgotten and, shoved into gaps of things that are happening. So if they need to go off to another team to do certain training, make sure that team has them booked in. If they need to go off and meet certain key stakeholders, make sure there's a meeting booked in for them so that people expecting them, and this all just goes seamlessly. Very obvious, but so often goes wrong, as a lot of you have said in the chat. These things are often just overlooked. All right, so once they're in, it's now important to make sure that they feel really welcome. And a key part of that, quite honestly, is you as the leader being available. So personally having blocked out some time to welcome them and show them around. There is absolutely nothing worse than you being the person to hire someone and then on their first day, you're just totally absent. You're the link. You're the person that they know through the recruitment process, through the, pre-employment onboarding process. You're that warm handover. So please make sure that you're available to welcome them. Your team is they are the people that get the work done, and you need to make sure you're available for them so that they feel supported. And this is the very first thing you can do for this newbie. Also, yes, and I know, Chris, you said no, they might have to help out and babysit someone for a while, but it really is important to have a buddy or a mentor or someone that they can go to if they're not sure how to find something, if they don't know where to look up information, if they forgot how to find the lunchroom, whatever it is. That sometimes the questions are really small and banal. So having a buddy that they can just tap into is really useful. I know I can remember back to when I started in one particular role, I was assigned a buddy. It was my first role in state government. And so I was in a totally new environment. And I was really grateful just to have someone I could ask some silly questions of sometimes, but also professionally, this lady was much more experienced than me in what I was learning how to do in this organisation. And so she was really available to me to ask all those questions about how do I fit this in and how do I go about that. And just knowing that she was happy and to help me with that just took a lot of the stress away. Of course, I was still mindful how much I was interrupting her, but just knowing that I had her was really, really built my confidence as well. Did anyone else have a similar experience? They had a buddy helping them? Even someone to have lunch with on your first day, if you're in that lunchroom sitting there on your own or you don't really know anyone, it can just be nice if someone just kind of is willing to sit with you. It doesn't have to be that same person. Could be different people who do different roles so that other people get to know the new team member as well. Okay, so we talked about clear expectations being really important too. Really, as we said, going through what it is that that position is expected to produce. What is it we're waiting to see from you, Natalie? So every Friday I'm expecting you to do this, but every day you need to serve these customers and we need these standards and we don't want people waiting any longer than this. Whatever those requirements are, you need to make sure they know what they are. It's not fair to have them out there not knowing what they're working towards. Even if they can't do it yet because they're new, it helps them to know, okay, I'm here now, but this is where I'm working to go. And if the gap is quite big, you need to make sure they feel supported, which we'll cover later on. So do explain the organisation's goals and how this particular role fits in. It's important that they understand the purpose. Why is this organisation even here? And where does my little piece of it make a difference to that? And even if they're at the very, very front line of the organisation, so at the bottom of the organisational hierarchy, they are vital to the overall outcomes of what happens. If they're on the front reception desk, if they're doing finance, paying bills and paying invoices, every single person in the organisation is doing something that helps the team win. And even if you're in a coffee shop, and keep going back to, it doesn't have to be a big organisation. The owner of the coffee shop should be having a pretty clear picture of what is it that we're trying to create here. And you all know yourself, there's different vibes and different types of clients and different kinds of service levels at different institutions that make coffee. And so basically you want people who get what you're trying to achieve and are working towards delivering that at any level. And then finally, as it says there, this helps to new employees to understand their responsibilities and align their efforts with what you're trying to do. It almost gives them a bit of a North Star. Okay, this is what I'm here for. And if you're not around and I'm not sure, I'll try and make a decision, to further us towards that goal. So you are empowering people a little bit there too. Any other comments about setting clear expectations? I mean, obviously you've got to be realistic in their first few weeks. You're not going to expect them to be hitting the same goals as what they will be in 3 months' time, perhaps. But certainly, giving them an idea about where they're heading and how long it might take them to get there is helpful. All right. Well, let's talk about training and development then, because that's that closing that development gap that we were just referring to. So, of course, you need to make sure that mandatory training's done as soon as possible. Do be mindful how boring it can be to be stuck at a computer doing self-paced training all day, every day for the first few days. That's not how you're going to engage someone. Remember, we're trying to have people feel connected and valued. Yes, we've got mandatory training to do, but does it have to be done all on day one? Can it be spread out over a week or even 2 weeks, such that at the end of the 2 weeks, they've ticked all that off. They've got a sense of the people that they're working with and the job that they're doing. And they've been doing a little bit of all of that throughout the first 2 weeks. Personally, I think that's a better way to go about it. You're not likely to let them go off on their own in the first 2 weeks too much. So if there's mandatory training still to be done, I don't think it's devastating usually if it takes 2 weeks to get through it. At least that way you're keeping their brain active, you're keeping them connected to other people, not just stuck in a room or stuck at a computer on their own, potentially feeling undervalued and bored, I have to say. So do talk about their skills and experience and think about what do we need to do to get you to this level, to that top level of experience and performance? And some people will come in with a lot of really great experience from other organisations or from other teams, and that's how they got the job based on merit. But what's the difference between good and great, and how can you get them there? And have that discussion very genuinely and openly early allows the person to say, well, look, I'm not really confident in this part of it. I've watched so-and-so do that, and honestly, I've got no clue what they're doing. There you go. Now you've got the first development goals. So, okay, do you shadow them with that person so that they can watch and learn, or do you set up some training, or do you get someone to walk through the process with them? What is it that you can do to help them understand how to do all the different components of the job to the same degree that you need in this job? Because even if they bring capabilities from another job in, you do it differently. You use different systems, it's a different operating environment. And so they need to have time and guidance to be able to do that well and independently. Having that discussion really early takes a lot of pressure off your newbie. It helps them to know that, okay, I don't have to be perfect, but there is training and support around me that is designed to help me lift. And so it really helps them to feel connected and valued. So like I said, do think about a mix of things like formal training is great, but being sent off-site away somewhere to learn something, this is formal training, that's great, but it doesn't mean anything unless you take it back and do something with it. And so it can be great for theory, it can be great for learning procedures and things like that, but often actually being shown the way, watching someone else do it, being able to ask questions over someone's shoulder about, or after the client left, why did you do it that way? In my past experience, we've always done it like this. Understanding how the policies and procedures actually work in practice and why it's important that they work that way in your context. So hands-on experience and shadowing is probably a really great way to get people up to speed quickly rather than sending them away on too many courses. That could come, and my profession is to deliver courses, so I'm not saying that they're not valuable, but when you've got someone trying to get their head around a new job, being in the job and learning on the job is the best way to learn. Some of you might have heard of the 70-20-10 development model. It really just says that research has shown that we actually learn most of what we learn, 70% of what we learn just on the job, by testing things out, making mistakes, reading the procedures, trying again, those lessons learned, reflective learning, stretch assignments, all those sorts of things. That's how we learn. 20% of it is through social learning. So buddying, shadowing, mentoring, coaching, those sorts of things, which are also very important in those early days. So don't underestimate the power of letting people have a go at things, but in a supported way, not just dumping them in the deep end and hoping that they work it out. And this is where, going back to the momentum framework, this is where having systems in that optimized section are so important. When you've got a new person that comes in, you've got documented procedures, you've got processes, they've got a standard operating procedure kind of guideline of where to go, checklists, whatever you can give somebody. It's not up to them to make it all up or remember it or write their own notes. I'm sure they should write their own notes, but the more of those sorts of organisational or team structures that you've got around them just makes it so much easier to onboard a new person. So I'd encourage you to make sure that you've got procedures up to date. And then we've talked a bit about ongoing support. So providing that regular feedback beyond the initial onboarding period of like the first couple of weeks. You can't just do a wonderful job in 2 weeks and then let them go and go, oh, well, that's it, they're onboarded. Right, all done. Because if you do that, you're actually can unravel everything, all the good stuff you've done. If they hit a roadblock and they don't feel supported, they're going to potentially, you may lose them. So I would encourage you as their manager, or if you're not the manager, if some of you come from an HR background, I know we've got some HR people registered here, make sure that their line manager schedules regular check-ins to make sure that you're knowing what they're challenged by, celebrating any successes and supporting them to build their confidence in that way. Just knowing that I've got a meeting next week with my manager and I can talk to them about a challenge takes a lot of the stress away from it. And certainly having someone to say, look, you're doing great, even though I still feel like I've got this much still to learn, somebody on my cheer squad is also about having me onboarded and feeling like I'm valued and contributing. Remember that employee engagement on successful onboarding goes up 2.65 times if you've got good onboarding. So I think this is where the rubber hits the road on that engagement piece. So the leader is critical in that. And of course, I would encourage you to send them email summaries after each feedback session or check-in session, just so that they know how they're going. Look, Natalie, just wanted to say again, thanks so much for continuing to master this particular thing. I think you're doing really well at that. I'm going to get Jane to come and help you to learn about this other aspect of the job next week, just so you know. She'll be in touch. It's reinforcing what you've said. They might not have taken it all in that one meeting, but also there's a little bit of accountability in there as well for you and for them. So make sure that you do send them the feedback. If you send it in an email, then they know it's going to happen. They're not walking away wondering, oh, will she forget? Is she going to remember to talk to Jane? It's going to be in the email. So they are the 5 steps in a little bit more detail, and I know in many ways they're logical. So I guess I've started alluding to this just in that very last section. It's really important that if you are a leader hiring somebody new into your team, that you accept the responsibility that comes with that in onboarding. A lot of people think that onboarding is HR's responsibility, and sure, if you're in a bigger organisation, HR will have some part to play in that, and they might be the ones to organise some of that mandatory training and all of those forms and everything that need to be filled in. Hopefully they've got some of those done before they start. But actually it's the leader that has that pivotal role in creating that welcoming environment and setting the expectations and connecting them to the people and to the work that they're going to do. Even what the small things that leaders do have a big impact on a new hire's experience. I was just talking to someone actually just this morning before this call, and they were saying how they've realised how sometimes even off-the-cuff comments that they make mean something. And you think, this person's new, they're vulnerable, they're trying to be liked and to get to know people and to do a good job. And so they are a bit vulnerable. And if you say something a bit dismissive, it can really hit home and disconnect them a little bit or make them worry that they're not doing a good job. So it hits their confidence. So be very careful what you say. I'm not saying you have to be, in fact, please don't be untrue about anything that you say, but do be looking for what they're doing right and not everything that they're not yet able to do. So you're trying to build confidence and keep them connected and wanting to learn and grow, rather than have them second guessing themselves in their mind all the time. And is this where I should be? Is this the right job for me? Everyone's going to take a little while to settle in, even if you are an internal person. So let's just look at a couple of scenarios. So in this scenario, the leader greets the new hire warmly on their first day, gives them a brief tour of the workplace, but then leaves them with their team without checking in again for 3 days. What do you think the impact is on your new hire's experience in that situation? Do you want to pop it in the chat? They feel forgotten. After 3 days? Really? Undervalued. Exactly. So even though it's only been 3 days, in those first 2 weeks particularly, the leader really has to stay connected in with them. I would suggest that you're checking in with them every day, every second day at the most, depending on the work structure, what you're doing. I mean, every team is different and how you operate. But it would be really great if you're checking in on them, just dropping in, seeing how they're going, maybe every morning or every night before you leave, just saying, how was your day? How's it all going? Is there anything I can do? That just taking that time, especially in the first week and 2 weeks, is giving that person, letting them know that they're valued. As you said, they're not forgotten. And even if you're busy doing lots of other things, and leaders are often in meetings all day, you're making time. It's showing, and your time is your best asset that you can give people, but it's showing that they're valued, important enough to find that time. All right, and here's a second example. During the team meeting in the new hire's first week, the leader introduces them but doesn't facilitate opportunities for them to contribute or connect with colleagues. So how do you think that's going to affect their experience? So here's our new person. Everybody can have a look at them, but there's no opportunity for them to say anything or to go and connect with them in any way. How might they feel then? So clearly they're going to feel disconnected, right? Yeah, a bit like their show and tell item. Absolutely, it's very true. All eyes on them, but there's just nothing. So even the opportunity to say where they've come from, what they're, before, where they worked before, or if they're straight from school, hey, this is my first job, I'm really looking forward to meeting you, or why they feel they got, recruited for the role. But just making sure that, the latest exhibition at the zoo, can't even say it, Chris, but that's right. It would look a bit like everyone's looking in on them and there's no interaction. So be very careful that you're not just parading them around. It's connection, connection, connection. Remember those 3 things. You need to connect them to people. So it's one thing to just introduce them, but you're not connecting them. So that's the key thing. A lot of leaders, I've seen a lot of leaders think, well, I took them around, I showed them, everybody, they know where they are. Everyone, meanwhile, is just watching this new person walk around the office, but they don't know who they are. So the leader hasn't kind of done that connection part of it. All right, so the onboarding plan then really is just the starting point of getting organised and welcoming people. And as I said, the leader is the one that sets that tone. It is so important that that employee understands their role, can connect with key people within the team and in other teams. So I'm going to give you a bit of an idea about how we could do that. But I'm wondering if anyone wants to pop in the chat while I'm doing this. Anything that you feel that you've seen done or that you've done that really has helped to build clarity, connection and confidence for new people as you're onboarding them. What are some of the things that you've found work really well? So just have a think about that and add that into the chat as we go. Because what I want to show you now is how I would onboard an employee into a team in a way that builds that clarity and connection and confidence so that they feel like they understand what the organisation does and where they fit in the team. And this is the part that I think a lot of people aren't doing in their onboarding, but it really empowers the employee to the new employee to take ownership of the role in a way that's a little different to how we've always done it before. In many ways, we've taken them along and say, oh, here's Joe from accounts. Joe's the person you go to when you need your accounts paid. And here's so-and-so from the operations team. And when you need to answer questions for a customer about, how things work, then Joe's, this person over here is probably the best person to speak to. So you go and introduce them to those people, which is great. But this next step is what I'm thinking would help them really connect in and understand the value of their role. Now, I've got this on a video, but I just want you to listen through it if you can and tell me at the end what you think the value is in this approach. All right, so let's just hope this all works.
Welcome to the organization. Here's the things that you're going to be doing. Here are the tasks and activities that are part of the job description that we've hired you to tackle. And here are the objectives for those tasks and activities. I have already shared with you the organization's strategic goals and our vision for the future. Here's the reality. As you go about your work here in this organization, it turns out there's nothing that you do in any moment that is not designed or intended to help someone else in the organization be more successful. Whether that's your manager or your customer or your peers or the people that report to you, your direct reports. So for the first couple weeks, what I am going to ask you to do is this. I'm going to ask you to go get really curious about what those people that you impact are trying to achieve. I will help you understand who those people are, given the tasks and responsibilities we've given you, and I would like you to ask those people 3 questions. 1. How does someone in my role affect your ability to do your work positively or negatively? 2. From your perspective, how could someone in my role be most helpful to you? And 3. How, at what frequency would you like me to check in and stay accountable to you on my impact on your ability to do your work? That's your part in getting oriented to your role. Once you've had those conversations, come back to meet me, your manager, and report to me on what you've learned, how you will impact these people when you go about tackling your tasks and achieving your objectives. Also, I would like to hear what you learn about what it will look like to hold yourself accountable, not just for what you're doing, but for your impact on those people. And when and how are you going to hold yourself accountable to delivering for them and our team? That's your first one-on-one check-in. After that, we will meet monthly and we'll discuss what you're learning in your regular check-ins with those people, and also how I can support you as you grow into the role.
What did you hear that was different to how we normally onboard people there? What were we actually asking the new person to do? So there were 3 questions in there that they were asked to go to the key stakeholders. So you might have introduced them to their key stakeholders in the first week, showing them who they are, why they're important for their role. But this actually asks them to go and make a time to meet with them one-on-one and ask them, how does the work that I do impact what you're trying to achieve? How does that work when that's going well? How does that work when I'm not doing my job well? How does that impact you? And how often would you like me to check in with you to make sure that the work I'm doing is supporting you the way it should? So those 3 questions, you've sent the person off to meet with those key people across the organisation, or it could be, if they're a leader, it might be their direct reports they're meeting with. What is the work that you do? How can I help you, or how can I hinder you in what I'm doing? And how often should we check in? And you might have a say in that. But it doesn't matter whether it's up or out or down in the organisational structure. These questions actually empower the new person to understand how their role impacts others. As the AI actor says, there's nobody in this organisation who does work that doesn't do it to support the success of someone else. Everybody is, whether you're internally facing or externally facing, is in customer service in some way. So it's building a service ethos in that person right from the first week or 2. It's helping them to understand where they fit and who they're accountable to when they don't deliver something, or when they don't put, when their reports aren't 100% accurate, or, when their reports are late, or whatever it is that the person is doing, they now understand the impact of that. You, as their manager, are not having to tell them, with your finger wagging that, oh, no, you really shouldn't do that because this is the impact. They're knowing that firsthand from their clients and from the people that they impact. And then you've also said to them, come back and talk to me about what you learn, and we'll talk about, you get the opportunity then to correct anything, answer any questions, and there will be questions, and help set up some way of making sure that you stay accountable to those people in a way that makes sense. When I say accountable, it's like, how often you're checking in, what makes sense there. And then that's the first one-on-one. And then in the future one-on-ones, we'll keep checking in on how that's all going for you. And that's an opportunity then to talk about how they're growing into the role, how their support and development needs to shift and change to support them, and also to answer any questions, but also to recognize when they're doing a great job. So that step of empowering them to go and actually get to know the impact of their role directly with those key stakeholders is a really important step in building accountability and ownership and connection. They know those people now. If they're going to have any problems, they can hop up off their chair and go and ring them, or go and meet them, or ring them, or email them, and there'll be a welcome face, which is also really useful in your team trying to keep things moving forward. Can you see the power in that? It really is very powerful. Number one, it sets the expectations on me as a new person that I'm in charge of this job, and I need to get to know who it is that I'm impacting. And secondly, it sets up that your role is to support and guide them, and that you're setting up a regular catch-up so that you'll do that, going forward. So this idea comes from the Arbinger Institute, and it's their SAM model, S-A-M model. You can look into that a little bit more, and it is recognised on the video, but I can send you the script for that as well. But that's basically the script that you could use with a new person in your own style and your own voice, to help them, give them something useful to do that will really help them take ownership of the role. Wondering what you think about that. Any concerns about using that approach? Do you think it's a good idea? Yeah, it definitely has promise. Sounds good. Yep, it's been tried and tested, and it really does work. And a lot of you aren't recruiting frontline people. You're recruiting, people with skills and professional skills that they bring in. So let's empower them and help them to understand their role themselves, rather than just figure it out along the way. I really just wanted to now wrap up a little bit before we get to questions, and just come back to this framework. As I said, the onboarding is a critical part of it, but you need to have other systems in place around a new person to help them succeed. They need to know what the team's purpose is, and that there's a plan that the team is working towards, how you're going to monitor their performance. Obviously, hiring the right people is critical, and onboarding them and developing them. We've touched on all of that at the very early stage of their time with you. But then moving into longer term career development, how they can back up other team members who have critical skills so they can go on leave. All of those sorts of things are part of the next one of optimizing and scaffolding your team so that they really have confidence that if one person's missing, the team is doing well. Systemizing things I referenced as well. So this framework really is how I go about training new leaders, how I go about training leaders stepping into director level roles. We look at this from a different set of lenses. When you're leading other leaders, obviously the lens changes than if you're the frontline leader. Even CEOs have to do all of this stuff. So these are the action steps that every leader needs to bed down. And once you know how to do it, you can take them to any job, and then you set up the same framework around yourself and your team, and you set up the foundation for high performance. So it's all grounded in theory and high performance research. So you learn them and you do them on repeat, and this is the benefit. Basically, your team has clear direction. You've got a really engaged team because they are empowered and they know what they're doing and they feel confident, and then they're future-proofed when things go wrong. So the momentum framework is really, as I said, it underpins everything that I do. I've got some testimonials there. probably won't go through those now, but it's really practical. It's designed to help leaders to actually get traction. So even if you've been leading for a few years and you feel like you're kind of doing it just the way you're feeling your way, then maybe bringing some structure to it can really help. And there's lots of tools and resources and checklists and guidelines and worksheets that go with the framework, really. So for coming along today, I do want to offer you 20% off any in-house training program that you might want for yourself or your team. Any leadership coaching that you might be interested in, or the Momentum membership program, which will launch in July, which is based around that circle model, that those 3 components. That's a 12-month membership program where we have online and offline, online training live, as well as offline training that you can do yourself, and lots of resources, as I said. But also, if you wanted to run a 2-hour team synergy workshop with some profiling to understand how you work together and how you can, what your team's strengths are and how to leverage those strengths better, then I can offer you that at 50% off. I can deliver that online if you're over in Brisbane, or in person. They work just as effectively. So let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in, or if you think there's a colleague of yours who might benefit from some of the work that I do. There'll be in the slides a code there. You can book some time to have a chat with me about what you think you need. So does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask, or any comments before we wind up? Any challenges that you've faced with onboarding that you'd like to bounce off me? Yeah, I often find that when you've got a lot of people to onboard, and I think, Danielle, you were saying that, constantly doing onboarding, it can become a little bit routine, and there should be an element of routineness to it. But, thinking very carefully about each individual and what they need, and making sure that there's time set up in their leaders' calendars, because I think, Danielle, you said you're a business manager. You're probably doing the onboarding on behalf of the line manager. So making sure the line manager doesn't abdicate their responsibility to you. Yeah, thanks so much. Lots to think about. Our team has been doing lots of onboarding statewide, and the feedback has been mixed. So I'm seeing ways to make the process better. Yeah, that's great, Ro. And hopefully, some of these tips that I've given you, and we'll send them out to you on email as well, will give you that foundation to think about the feedback that you've got and think, well, clarity and confidence and connection, those 3 critical elements, how can we raise the dial on those things? Because that's possibly, I would say, where things are going wrong somewhere along the line. Also, are the line managers very clear on what their responsibilities are, or are they abdicating them to someone else? To me, they're often the areas that go wrong, apart from there's no IT access on day one, those sorts of things, which are obvious problems. Same with us, Chris says, our frontline staff have had more streamlined onboarding compared to our office staff. Okay, so thinking about the impact of how you could improve that. Are there elements of the frontline staff that could be brought into office staff? What is the problem? Is it the line management ownership again? I'm not sure, but these are good things to think about, Chris. So thank you for your comments. Pretty much, yeah, okay. It quite often is the line manager's responsibility. Unfortunately, a lot of line managers just wish somebody else could do all this for them because they're busy, okay? And you're busy people as well, so I get it. But ultimately, your team and how effectively your team functions should be a line manager's number one, concern, to be honest. Because if your team's not firing, you're not getting stuff done. If your team's not firing, you're getting dragged into all sorts of firefighting and bottlenecks, and it's not great. So fundamentally, your focus should be on your team. And if your team is functioning, then everything else has a full chance of actually working. That's my philosophy on life, and I've seen it happen over and over again. So if you think there's something I can do to help you or any of the leaders in your organisation, please let me know. I'm happy to have a chat with them. But really appreciate your time coming along today, your contribution. I hope to speak to more of you soon. All the best.